It's another episode of Facilitation Fridays. I'm Kalani Das, your host and teacher. And once again, we're going to look in the way of music, creating sound connections in music therapy, and there's a link to this below. We're going to look in here on page 88, and I'm going to be talking about some techniques we call empathetic techniques. These are techniques that we use in music therapy. They're techniques that anybody can use in their work as a facilitator. And as I've mentioned before, all of these apply to things outside of music as well. So whether you're a coach, or you're hosting a meeting, or you're you're monitoring or helping facilitate a discussion or some sort of mediator, these would all apply to you as well. So let's get right in. So these are called empathetic techniques because they're designed to convey the feeling of understanding and empathy, putting yourself in somebody else's position, basically. And the way we do that in music is several ways. One of the most common ways we can do that is to adopt or to reflect the qualities of somebody else's music. And right now we're talking about purely musical, the musical modality. These can also be done through body language. They can be done through language in general. If you're a student or you know about NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, you know that they talk about similar techniques. And what that is using a similar, it would be like using a similar language to somebody else, using similar terminology. In NLP, they talk about visual, kinesthetic, and auditory types of words. Like, I hear what you're saying would be auditory, right? I see what you're talking about would be visual. I feel you would be kinesthetic, right? But when we're playing music, we're not using words. So how do we do that musically? Well, we can play in a way that's similar. In other words, we can make our music have similar features to somebody else's music. So in terms of rhythm, in terms of dynamics, in terms of timbre, possibly, density, like note density, of course, and then you can add melody, harmony, playing in tune with somebody else, all those kinds of things. When we do that as a response to the music of someone else, then we're showing that, one, we're listening to them, that we've heard them, right? Because in order to respond that way, we would have to have listened to them. Two, we're showing that we, on some level, value what they're doing because we're incorporating the features of their music in our own music. And then I would say three, perhaps we're also indicating that we are willing to forego our own personal impulses and desires to place theirs front and center and place the music that they're making in a little bit more of an importance, to shine light on it, to focus on it, to not just do what we want to do, but to support what they're doing. So these are also not only empathetic, but they're also supportive. So matching is a term that we use to describe music that is similar to the music of somebody else. So, similar in rhythm, timing, all of the qualities or characteristics of music as you can break them down in the elements of music. So if you're not familiar with the elements of music, you can look that up. But this would also apply, of course, to conversation. And these are things that salespeople often study, how to create rapport with your customer and, use similar body language and, reflect back to them things that they're saying and, make them feel comfortable. But in the musical context, that's what matching would look like, something similar. And then we can make that stronger with another technique. And these are all purposefully used techniques. These are not happening by accident, right? These are things that you choose to do as a facilitator. If we add a little focus to matching, we could end up with what we call synchronizing. And synchronizing, and you wouldn't do this when you're having a conversation with somebody, although it's a fun exercise, you can try it, is you try to play pretty much exactly what they're playing. So you literally, synchronize with them Now, you might be playing a different type of instrument, but that's okay. But if you were playing, say, a rhythm instrument, you would just play the same rhythm. You would try to use the same dynamics. You might try to use the same tonal arcs or tonal melody, as in if you're playing a drum that has two different sounds, you might also try to synchronize your playing to reflect the differences of the person's two drum sounds. If you're singing or you're playing a melodic instrument, you would certainly try to play the same melody. So synchronizing is just doing the same thing. Now that's a pretty strong action, so you have to decide if that's appropriate. You don't necessarily want to do that. Somebody might feel like it's just too much, like, hey, get off of my music. This is what I'm doing. Why are you copying me? So you can end up with a situation where it might feel like, two kids that are in the back seat of a car, and one keeps doing the same thing the other one does, and the first kid gets annoyed because his brother or sister is just doing exactly what they're doing. I don't know why that's annoying, but apparently it can be. So you have to be mindful of that. But synchronizing is, doing the same thing as somebody else is doing. And then another term that actually I coined, because there wasn't really a term for this, but yet it's something that I do. It's momentarily synchronizing. And the way I use this is in a group setting. And let's just think about a group drumming setting. So you're doing group drumming, it's improvisation, and instead of focusing on one person and doing synchronizing with that one person, which you can do, that's a great way to bring out their voice, make their voice a little bit louder, especially if they're a soft player. You can balance their voice in the ensemble. What I'll typically do is momentarily synchronize with multiple people, say 2 or 3 people. And I'll pick up little pieces of their rhythms, and I will incorporate them into my one rhythm. For example, that's one way I do it. There's different ways I might do this, but momentarily synchronizing, it's kind of like checking in on people and just I play a little bit of what this person does and then a little bit of what that person does. And they may or may not even notice that, but it gives us a moment of connection. And again, these are empathetic techniques. These are validating. And it's strengthening the music that's in the community. So I'm really reflecting back. I'm supporting everybody. So when I do that momentarily, not for an extended period of time, but just a couple beats here, a couple beats there, we call that marking. And marking you can think of as just momentarily. It's very short bursts of synchronizing. So you're not synchronizing in the traditional sense of playing everything the person's playing. It's just a little kind of check-in. But think about how you might do that in a conversation. Not that you're going to talk at the same time as somebody, which actually brings me to the next technique. But you can do this momentarily, kind of reflect what's happening in a conversation. The way you would do that is with this last technique that we're going to talk about right now, which is imitating. Imitating also, you can call it echoing. There's different terms that are used for some of these. Some people call the synchronizing, you could call that doubling, or you could call that shadowing, or even mirroring. And all these terms have been used. I just like synchronizing. And in imitating, that also, we could call that echoing. In fact, part of the definition of imitating is echoing. So you could use the term echoing, you could use the term imitating. I use the term imitating in the book because that's been more of what's been used in the prior writings in the music therapy field. But at the end of the day, these are just words. It's not critical that you use one as opposed to the other. As long as you communicate the idea effectively, that's what matters. So in this case, imitating is related to synchronizing, right? Because you're going to play what the person played, but you're doing it after they played it. Hence, you're echoing or repeating back what somebody said. And again, these show that you've heard them, that you value them, that you want to seek clarification. This relates to group discussion techniques. I list some of those in the back of the book. You might, if you've been to a counselor, they may have used this technique. They might have said something like, so what I'm hearing you say is, and then repeat back what the person said. And that's a way of making sure that you're understanding them, but also, more importantly, to make sure that they know that you heard them. All right, so that's why these are all called techniques of empathy. In a musical setting, you might just echo, you could echo immediately what somebody played. So somebody plays something, ba-ba-da, ba-da-ba-da, ba-ba, and then you play it, right? Now, of course, to echo, presumably the person would leave a space, but it's not a critical feature, but typically somebody might play a couple beats and leave a little space, and then you would play what they played in the subsequent couple beats. That doesn't have to happen. That could happen. Sometimes it's nice when people are playing and leaving space. I would fill the space with what they played, and it just reinforces what they're doing. Again, it's validating. It's an empathetic technique. It's a way to build community and build connection within the music in a kind of subtle way. And I want to say again, it's not important that everybody knows that you're doing these things as the facilitator of the music and as the kind of hub of the musical wheel, if you will. It's not important that they cognitively are aware that you're doing these things, but there will be an effect. So whether they're conscious of it or they're not conscious of it, it's not critical, but it will affect the feeling, and on some level, the people will feel it. And getting back to that kind of salesman, like a good salesman doesn't want the customer to know what they're doing to help them feel more comfortable, right? Presumably. They just want them to feel more comfortable. So that's our goal. These techniques, again, are in the book, The Way of Music, and there's a lot more of these. There's different techniques. In fact, I'm gonna give you one more right now. It's called Incorporating. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about these on our Patreon site. So it's World Drum Club, and this will wrap up the YouTube part. But then we're going to continue the discussion on the Patreon site for patrons as a bonus. But incorporating would be our last technique. Incorporating just means using things that other people have played in your own music. So it's kind of related to synchronizing and matching and imitating and even marking. But it's a way to bring those things back at a later time. So they're not immediately happening like imitating or certainly synchronizing, which happens right in the moment. But these would be things that you bring back later on. So these have been empathetic techniques that we use. Primarily, these are in the field of music therapy, but I teach these at my courses for musicians who want to facilitate musical experiences for any occasion. As a music therapist, I would use these in a clinical way to help people reach their therapeutic goals, but they're just as valid and useful for people to help them reach their musical goals, or just to have fun, or just to feel better connecting with each other through music. Okay, so this will wrap up the YouTube portion of the video. We're going to continue at patreon.com/Kalani. If you're not a member or supporter or patron of World Drum Club, please consider supporting the channel. This channel is member supported, so it's kind of like public radio or something. You can chip in a couple bucks a month and help keep us moving in a direction that brings you value. And I hope this has been valuable to you. If it has, please leave a kind comment below or give us a thumbs up, you know, the drill, all that kind of things. And I'll see you all in the next Facilitation Fridays. Thanks for watching. We're going to continue now at patreon.com. All right, patrons, we're going to continue the Facilitation Friday lesson on empathetic techniques. And I went over some of these, but let's review them quickly. We had, and these, if you have the book, these are starting on page, I think it was 88, yeah. These are all part of musical facilitation techniques. Empathetic techniques is the category. And I want to say that these are not exclusively empathetic techniques. These can be used in different ways. It's like any technique. A technique doesn't have just one definition or one application. It's like a hammer. Yes, a hammer is generally used for pounding nails or things, but it can be used for a lot of other things. And if used skillfully, it can be used for things that most people don't imagine it can be used for. So as long as it's used for good or art making or creativity, or if it helps you in some way, that's a good use, right? So let's review some of these. We had matching, and I use matching a lot, actually. And I think it's something that you can start off doing if you want to start trying some of these techniques with another person or in a group. You can start off with matching because there isn't a requirement for precision when you're doing matching, right? So matching is an ensemble activity. You think about matching clothes, right? You're not wearing the same thing on your top and bottom, but they match, right? They go together. Why do they match? Well, matching doesn't necessarily have to be similar. I said it was similar in a way. I said it had similar features, which is true, but it doesn't necessarily have to sound very similar. It just needs to fit with the music of the other person or fit with the music of a group. That doesn't mean it has to be almost the same, right? So a black shirt can fit with white pants or gray pants or red pants. As long as things fit together in a way that makes sense, it's okay. So think about matching in that way too. That's a little added bonus. Maybe you can contrast something and it still fits. So next we had synchronizing, and I mentioned this in the YouTube part, but I want to give you guys a more specific example of that little exercise I was talking about. And I think this is something fun that you could try. And this will challenge your skills, and it's fun, and you can do this with friends or family, or you could do it at a workshop if you're facilitating workshops. And this is something that I sometimes do, so it's really fun. You get people to pair up and have them face one another. And what's great about this is you can do this without even people having to speak the same language. I've done this with people that don't speak the same language. But what it is you're trying to synchronize. So you want to do the same thing. Have one person just start talking slowly, and the other person has to say exactly the same thing at the same time. Now, it sounds pretty difficult, but actually it's not as hard as you might think. So I want you to try this, and then let me know how it turns out. But you would talk like you just say anything like, I got up today and walked outside, right? It's like talking about like that speed. And what the other person has to do is look, listen. Maybe they're looking at your mouth, they're listening, and they're also kind of anticipating or projecting what you might say, right? In other words, if I said, I got up this, I'm going to say morning, right? Because I probably won't say evening, unless it was a really late night, the night before. But you know what I mean? You can kind of, because of the language, if you're the similar language speaker, then you would know what's coming up. So that's another interesting way. And we do that in music too. When we're synchronizing with people's music, we have a feeling of where it's going, and we try to synchronize. And it's guesswork, but a lot of the time you might surprise yourself. You could be right, and you'd synchronize pretty closely with the other person. Marking, another great thing to do, another great way, and you can do synchronizing and marking. Here's how you can practice that. You could actually do it by yourself, and you could, for example, you're sitting out somewhere in public, and you can just use body percussion or your voice, kind of your mouth sounds inside your own head, so you're not making a bunch of sound. If you wanted to play an instrument, you could do this, out in public. But you just find people that are doing things. Maybe you go to a park, and you sit down somewhere, and you watch people moving around, and then you make music to synchronize with what they're doing. We call this cross-modal synchronization, when you're synchronizing with somebody's movements and you're making music. So you've got music you're making, and they're doing movement. There's a long tradition of this, of course, in dancing and drumming going together. Or you could even interpret visual art or lots of things through different types of modalities like spoken word, movement, visual art, and sound. But the point is to practice synchronizing or matching. Or marking. So you just find things. Maybe a dog runs by, or maybe somebody's flying a kite, or two people are walking slowly, and then a jogger comes by, and you just synchronize with all those things. That's going to be a way for you to practice and get better. And it's also fun. All right. Lastly, we had incorporating. And incorporating, as I mentioned before, is a way for people to come back to and recycle material that was previously presented. So if somebody in your group or somebody you're talking to says something or they play something, later on you would use that and bring that back. And that can become a theme. Like we have the term meme now, right, which is very popular. And a meme or a theme or also we might call that a motif or motive. These are things that come back in music, and they bring continuity. But more importantly, in terms of the empathetic lens with which we're looking through these things now, we're looking through to look at these things. It's, again, validating, and it reinforces the idea that you heard the person because you're using their material, right? So it's kind of a form of flattery, right? It's like, we're not going to go as far to say you stole it and now you're giving it back to them. But it's a nice way to reinforce what people have done, to bring a theme back, to bring back some of their music, and it can help them feel good, feel validated, feel important, help them just, lift them up. And from a facilitative standpoint, I think we can all agree that that's a good thing. All right. So this is for you patrons. Thanks for supporting the channel. I hope this is helpful. Even if you don't think of yourself as a facilitator per se, you know what? We're all facilitators. We facilitate all sorts of relationships all the time, whether we're talking to people, playing music, doing business, whatever we're doing, in family, in the public, with our colleagues, whatever. All right. So check these out, try them out, and let me know how they work out. All right? I'll see you all soon. Thanks for watching.